Hi, everybody. Welcome back to class. It's Bram Duffee here with Unit 1. Today, we're going to talk about something vital for every aspect of our lives, which is studying human communication. And before we begin, this week you have three things to think about. And so I want to make sure you get access to your textbook through the link that I just posted. So this was a learning curve for me for this semester, not having electronic textbooks before. So we got that worked out, and you should be able to access through the link posted. So make sure to read Unit 1. Also, remember, there's a journal in this course, and it's going to be due at the end. And each week, you're to write a paragraph about your life application of the course. And these weekly journal notes, will then be used to create a final course journal at the end. So there's no special place for you to post that paragraph each week. You just need to do it and save it and continue along. So I need you to review the assignment prompt and follow along each week. So that's one thing. The other thing is your participation in the class will be made up of weekly discussion boards. And each work activity is worth 2 points each. So this includes 1 point for the initial post that's due by Thursday each week. And then another post that you have to do by Sunday gives you your other point. So that's for the class discussion where you continue the work to elevate the topic that's being discussed. So all discussions have to be completed by Sunday night. Again, the first post is before Thursday, and to complete the week, your follow-up discussion should be posted by Sunday night at midnight, so I can give you full credit. So access your Unit 1 in the textbook and complete your journal prompt, save that for yourself, and do the discussion board post for Unit 1 before Thursday with follow-up due by Sunday, all right? All assignments that you see in the textbook system reveal are just for your practice, and they don't count towards class points. So make sure you read your syllabus to be properly following along with what you need to accomplish and don't have any mix-ups. So to go into our lecture today, I want to just be able to talk about what makes the study of communication special or different. And you might wonder how it's different from other kinds of classes in the social sciences like psychology or sociology. And well, those fields focus on understanding behavior or society as a whole. Communication zeroes in on how we connect with each other through words and gestures, expressions, even silence. So you think about it. When you send someone a text, do you use a smiley face, a thumbs up emoji? Do you just type K? Each choice says something different about how you want to come across. And communication is all about how we craft and interpret those messages every day. And so here's something that might surprise you. Communication has been something that's been studied for thousands of years. It goes all the way back to ancient Greece, where philosophers like Aristotle explored rhetoric, which is the art of persuasion. And people have been trying to figure out the best way to communicate since, long before Wi-Fi or even writing on paper was a thing. So why should you study communication? Well, first, it's an intricate and fascinating process. Have you ever had a misunderstanding with somebody, even though you thought that you were being perfectly clear? Well, that's because communication is complicated. And one concept we study is called co-rumination. And this happens when you and a friend obsessively talk about problems in your lives without coming up with solutions. It's kind of like venting to a friend about a bad day at work again and again. And it sounds harmless, right? But research shows that dwelling too much on the negative can actually make you feel worse. So instead, the study of communication teaches us how to shift those conversations towards finding solutions rather than just staying stuck. Another thing communication teaches us is about critical thinking. It's like a superpower for understanding the messages that you see and that you hear, because part of that process is knowing when to keep an open mind. And keeping an open mind is key. You might need more information before making up your mind. And critical thinking helps us avoid falling for information that's wrong, especially in a world out there that's full of noise. So think about this. Communication helps us meet new people and make friends and even strengthen or, well, end relationships. For, you know, one example I think about is starting a new job, and how do you build connections with coworkers? It's not about just showing up. You create rapport by knowing how to interact, whether it's cracking a joke at the right time or listening to someone who's sharing an idea. It's just good communication changes the way we relate to others. It's how we establish our identity as well. Who are you? How do you want the world to see you? Maybe funny or confident or thoughtful. It's just all of that can come across in the way that you communicate. This means that studying communication is crucial for your career. So no matter the field that you're in, strong communication skills can do something to set you apart. And employers want people who can lead meetings and resolve conflicts and give clear presentations, instructions. And so imagine you're pitching an idea and nail it because you've mastered the art of communication. And that's the kind of thing that gets you noticed. People aren't just charismatic. Sometimes it takes work. And at its core, communication is a transactional process. It means it's not just a one-way street. Both people involved are sending and receiving and making sense of messages at the same time. And those messages, well, they can be verbal, like words. They can be nonverbal, like gestures and facial expressions, or even the tone of your voice. And this exchange happens in specific contexts, and it's shaped by individual factors like society forces and culture. So, for example, like a casual chat with your best friend at their house will feel and sound a lot different from a job interview in an office. See what I mean? It's just a different presentation, different way. So now that we've got the big picture, let's break this down into some basic components of communication. And trust me, each one of these has its own role to play. They're fundamental in the way that we label and analyze messages. The model that we are going to talk about is sometimes called the universal model of communication or the transactional model of communication, but our book calls it the synergistic model of communication. And I am writing a book right now that presents communication methods to healthcare providers. And in the very first part of the book, I'm writing about this very model because it's important to know that messages are broken down and analyzed and diagrammed. And so all of that happens by labels. And so this kind of interaction can be labeled so that we can study it. So to make this work, first we have to create a message. So imagine that you're trying to say something exciting, like inviting a friend to a concert. You start by encoding your idea. So you turn that into words. It might sound something like, hey, I got tickets to the concert Friday night. Do you want to come? Your friend then decodes your message and interprets what you mean. So it's pretty straightforward, right? Well, here's where it gets cool. Communication is symbolic. So think about it. The word concert doesn't look or sound like an actual show, and yet we all know what it means. So symbols, like words, are arbitrary, and we've all just sort of agreed on their meanings. But when we think about your friend, that person speaks a different language. Certainly, at that point, the word concert might not mean anything to them. It's just about the connection that you all have with that together and individually. And so that's just one example of how symbols vary and how and why effective communication takes some kind of practice. So the other thing is that when we have messages, there is a meaning creation that happens. And so this is the heart of communication. Each message that you send has two types of meaning. First, there's the content, which is the literal information, like there's a concert Friday. And then there's a relationship meaning, which shows the connection to the person that you're talking to. So, for instance, asking your best friend to the concert might suggest closeness, while asking a new acquaintance might mean that you're trying to build a friendship. So communication isn't just about words, it's about the shared meaning. And how that comes across is very different depending upon all these factors. And one of those factors is the setting that you're in. And so when we have a setting, it's like the physical surroundings of a communication interaction. And so think about it. Would you rather ask your friend about the concert at a noisy cafe or a quiet living room? You know, the context there might make a difference. And so that kind of context doesn't just stop at a location. It's also about the mood, the environment, and how comfortable that you both feel. So the setting can mean a lot of different things that make that context work. Another component is the participation. You know, the participants, when we talk about that, it's just a fancy way of talking about the people that are involved in the communication. And every interaction changes depending upon who you're talking to. After all, the kind of messages that you'd craft for your professor is probably different from the one that you'd send like your brother or your sister. So for this all to work, we have channels. And if you look at the diagram in your text, or if you just think about each aspect, one of those that it's displaying is channels. And a channel is the means through which messages are transmitted. So, for example, are you texting, talking face to face, or leaving a voice message? Each channel affects how the message is received. Like texting, for instance, doesn't convey tone or facial expression. So it's easy for messages to get misunderstood. And, you know, gosh, I'm sure that most of us have had a text that's been taken wrong before. And that brings us to noise, which is another aspect on the diagram. And I don't mean necessarily the kind of noise that you hear in the background, like traffic or loud music. Well, that can be part of it. But noise is anything that interferes with a message. So this can be external, like your phone making noise like mine did just now, or it could be external and cause a disruption. So even if it's in your mind, or if it's a noise out there that's causing a problem like your phone, either kind of noise can mess with the quality of communication. And so the other part of this diagram loop that you'll see is this arrow back to the original encoder called feedback. And feedback is when the other person responds to your message, and that can happen either verbally or non-verbally. So Imagine asking your friend about the concert again, and they say, sounds awesome. Or even just smile and nod. See, that's a feedback that they're giving you. And it tells you that they got the message and that maybe they're interested. Or on the flip side, they might look at you because they're unsure. Then you know that you need to ask if they're actually free or if maybe they're just not interested. So to look over all this, I want to tell you that what we're going to study in communication is a really fascinating process, but there's lots of moving parts. A message creation, a meaning creation, the setting for where it happens, the participants involved, the channels that the message gets communicated through, the noise that interferes, and the feedback that happens to be given during the interaction. And so we understand that these components can help you communicate more effectively and avoid frustrating misunderstandings, especially when we can do something like add in the symbolic nature of communication, right? Because at the end of the goal here is to create shared meaning so we understand what's going on with each other. And so it's pretty incredible how complex and powerful our conversations really are. So this synergistic model is a cool way to think about communication because it helps us with this dynamic. I've gone through different, labeling different aspects of this model, but I want to go back and give you some history because there are earlier models of communication out there. Like one of them was a linear model of communication. And so for that model, you write a message on a piece of paper or drop it in the mail and the other person reads it. That's pretty much how the linear model works because one person sends the message and the other person receives that message. And that's fine for something simple like mailing a postcard, but it doesn't explain the real conversations and how they happen. And that's where that synergistic model comes in. It is transactional, and that's why I say that some textbooks call this a transactional model of communication, because that's sort of like another good descriptor for this synergistic model. And it just means that communication isn't just one way, it's a two-way street. And both people are sending and receiving messages at the same time, all the time. It's like a lively conversation. And so think about the last time you had a chat with a friend. While you were speaking, they might have been nodding or smiling or saying, yeah, uh-huh. That kind of communication happens in both directions. And it's interactive. And that meaning is created together. Plus, it's not just a one and done kind of deal. Communication is an ongoing process. Everything that you say is shaped by the previous conversations and relationships. And that's where this synergistic model gets really interesting. Our communication is influenced by individual forces. And these include things like age, race, ethnicity, gender, or even your personality and abilities. So for instance, if you're shy, how you deliver a message might differ from someone who's super outgoing. And our field of experience, like education and past experience, and all this stuff also shapes how we communicate. So here's an example. Imagine you have two coworkers discussing a project, and one has years of experience in the field, and the other is brand new. Their conversations are going to obviously bound to be influenced by having some kind of differences, right? And so that is the power of some of these individual forces at play. But there's more, because communication is also influenced by societal forces and culture. And this is like the lens that we see the world through. And we know that culture can be made up of shared values and behaviors and perceptions within a group. And the thing is that culture isn't static, it's always changing. For example, if you grew up in a culture where direct eye contact is a sign of respect, then You might get confused or even offended when interacting with someone from a culture where avoiding eye contact shows respect. It's just culture influences almost every communication interaction, whether we realize it or not. And well, part of culture that we get comes from societal forces. And we have to know that societal forces pretty much hit us hard as kids, coming directly from our parents until maybe age 7 to 10. And then it shifts over to listening to our friends' parents and our friends only, right? And so those kinds of influences really matter, and those forces can really make some big influence. There's also context. So context includes, well, things like the physical setting, and that's like where the conversation is happening. And it could be the occasion. So imagine trying to explain a complex problem to your boss in the middle of like a loud place. It may not be the best place to have that conversation if no one can hear. And so the context can be a ball of things mixed up that also involves a problem with noise, a problem with feedback. And so you change the physical setting, and everything about the communication, it can also change. So this synergistic model shows us that communication is never just about sending and receiving words only. It's transactional. It's something that's shaped by individual forces, society influences, cultural nuances, and even the context that we're in. Now, I want you to think of a time when someone told you the truth, even though it was like hard to hear. And that moment ended up building some bit of trust, probably, though, because if you imagine that someone lied to you, it probably hurt more than if they just been up front. And that's the power of ethical communication. It even goes down to simple things like, you have something on your face. Sharing that information is a way that does build that trust. And ethical communication has a lot of different dimensions. And one of the biggest ones is truthfulness. Truthfulness means being honest, but it also means thinking before we speak. So, for example, a friend asks how they look in a new outfit. Your truthful response might be, "I think it fits you well, but I know how much you love brighter colors, so you might feel more comfortable in something else." See, truthfulness doesn't have to hurt someone's feeling or be harsh. It can come with tact and with care. And so with ethical communication, we have truthfulness, and also there's the whole part about sharing or withholding information. And sometimes being an ethical communicator means knowing when it's appropriate to share something or not to share something. So imagine you're at work and you overhear a private conversation between two of your coworkers. Is that ethical to share what you just heard with others? Probably not, especially if that information wasn't yours to share. On the flip side, withholding information that's important, like not admitting a mistake that affects a whole team project or something, all of this could be unethical because it leaves others in the dark. So there's also a benefit and harm of messages. So before communicating, it's worth asking yourself, it's like asking yourself, will what I say help the person I'm speaking to, or will what I say to the person hurt them? So, for example, giving constructive feedback to a coworker, that may be beneficial, but it also could be belittling or make them feel like they've been belittled, and that's harmful. So balancing the benefit and the harm is key to ensuring that your words build others up rather than tear them down. So it's just goes back to another part about just thinking before you speak to make sure that your message is going to come across the way that it's intended. And of course, communication isn't always simple. Complex, ambiguous situations pop up all the time. And so think about navigating an argument with a close family member. Do you share everything you're feeling, even though it might hurt their feelings? Or do you hold back a little bit, maintain peace, even if you feel like it's not really resolved? These kinds of decisions force us to think about our values and ethical beliefs. So that's why it's helpful to develop your own communication ethics. Think about what it is that you stand for. What do you value? And then use that as your guide when communicating, because this kind of self-awareness isn't something that you do just once. It's an ongoing practice that defines you. And that definition that people get of you can end up translating into how people see you as a person and see those different components that make them understand that you are a shady person or you are an ethical person, that you are someone that's there to do the right thing or someone that's there to be selfish. So all of those things will come across in the long run. And so it's like important to be clear otherwise. And that just means thinking before we speak about the context, about the culture, about the event, about the context, about the time. And this leads to a conversation about competence. and when we talk about communication competence, it means that what we're doing is both appropriate and effective. So appropriateness is about following the rules and the norms of a specific context. So like you might be more formal when emailing a boss than just texting a close friend. Being effective in the way you communicate is also all about achieving your goals. So, being able to reflect on, hey, did the person understand what was needed? Did they get the message clearly? Did I express myself clearly? So when you balance the appropriateness and the effectiveness, you become a more skilled communicator. And speaking of goals, competent communicators focus on 3 types of goals during an interaction. First, there's the content goal. The content goal is something that relates to sharing information effectively. So, for example, explaining instructions for a group project, right? That's the content. Then there's a relationship goal. And the relationship goal is about maintaining a positive connection with the person that you're speaking to. It's like making sure that you're being respectful and kind to a friend while giving advice. And then there's the identity goal. The identity goal is about presenting yourself in a way that aligns with who you want to be. So think about wanting to come across as confident during a job interview, or that oomph that shows off who you are. This is the identity, the goal at play. So to put all of this together, becoming an ethical and competent communicator means thinking carefully about our choices, even big and small. It's about truthfulness, balancing how much information to share, weighing benefits and harms, and reflecting on your ethical stance. It's also about striving for communication competence by being appropriate and effective while staying mindful of the goal, of the communication goal. And so there you have it. Communication isn't just about talking, it's about connecting, resolving problems, and creating opportunities. When you study it, you gain tools to transform your life, whether it's that making friends or managing work challenges or becoming a better critical thinker. A lot of times we feel like, gosh, I talk to people every day. I communicate with people every day. And I'm good at it. It's a normal thing that I do. And we can always do this particular part better. So much so that it is a major part of a college experience is communication. And by chance, it also happens to be a major part of our life and our work experience. So to that, I wish you a good week this week, and I look forward to reading about your responses to the discussion board.